So welcome to the Agile Strategy Meetup group. It's been a while. Some of you have been here before, and during Q1 we had a lot of intensive meetings with different perspectives on strategy. Today is going to be a little bit different because we have Hosanna visiting, and you will talk about product strategy from your context and with your experiences, the lessons that you have learned. And we will follow the normal format, which is about 30 minutes from you. You're going to use Menti as your presentation format, and there is a link in the notes. And then we will have time for Q&A after that. Is it okay to get us started like that?
Absolutely. That sounds great. And thank you so much for having me
Very
on.
well. Thank you for being here. Please.
Of course. So I'll start sharing. Did that work for everybody? Can people see my screen? Okay, I see some nods. Great. Awesome. So hi everyone. I'll do an intro in a second, but before I intro myself, I'd love to just kick off today with a quick intro of who's in the audience today. So I've got one question to kick us off on the Menti to understand kind of who's in the audience today and do a little user testing to understand what kind of discussion we can have today. So I'm seeing we got one or two agile coaches, maybe. We've got a few others. I'll call on you in a second if you're brave. And quite a few product managers, which is exciting to see. It's good. Also, more agile coaches showing up now. For the folks who said other, can I get some either comments in the chat or live call outs on what roles people have and what hats they're wearing? Oh, now we have 50%. I should have included more roles outside of those two functions. Let's see, we've got project managers, nice. Academia, okay, awesome. Very cool. Awesome. Great. Well, I like to start with this question because I think as I could talk ad nauseum about product management, I could talk ad nauseum about agile, some sort of combination of both. But I think as product managers, it's really important that we get to know our users and we kind of take that user first approach. That's one of the core principles of agile as well. So I just wanted to start today by kind of practicing what we preach and understanding a little bit more about you and hopefully making this talk a bit more dynamic. Awesome. So now I guess it's time to introduce myself. So I'm Hosanna. I am currently the Director of Global Program Management at Spotify. I've worn many hats in my career. These are just some of the hats that I've worn. So I started my career actually as a software engineer, working at SurveyMonkey, which is that banana photo you see. That's me at a conference handing out swag at SurveyMonkey. I worked on machine learning kind of projects and features, as well as on the growth team, kind of growth hacking, how we could expand our kind of SaaS business to new users and across building the experimentation platform internally. From there, I also joined Accenture, and that's where you'll hear me talk a little bit about my experiences at Airbnb and Twitter, which were some of my clients during my time there. And that's where I worked as kind of a platform product strategist, working with those companies to scale up and how they could better utilize their platform internally. And I also included some photos of just some of my passion projects outside of work. The photo of you seeing me on my laptop, that's me and one of my mentees. I love kind of encouraging young girls to go into STEM and technology and pursuing their interest there. So feel free to also shout out and ask me any questions about that as well if you're curious about getting involved with that. Awesome. So again, before we start talking through what is product strategy, what is agile, I think we all have maybe our own versions. So I'll just quickly talk about the lens in which I'm talking about product strategy and agile. So for me, strategy is as generic as a plan of a plan of action designed to achieve a long-term or overall aim. I know there's lots of frameworks in tech like OKRs, maybe KPIs. We've all probably experienced some flavor of those kind of goal setting or North Star kind of activities. But really, I think it's important for us to just take a step back and realize that strategy is as generic as just a plan. And one of my favorite quotes is plans are worthless, but planning is everything. This tends to go over particularly well with the engineering audience who hates big planning meetings. And so I like to throw this one out here, there as well. Um, awesome. So then what is Agile? And I just took these kind of three principles from the core Agile kind of manifesto that was written in the early 2000s, but individuals and interactions over process and tools, working software over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, and responding to change over following a plan. You'll hear me kind of touch on these themes over my lessons learned and takeaways that I share from my career. So I think it's, again, important to just root us on when we talk about Agile, these are the definitions I'm using. Okay, great. So takeaway number one. From my experience, autonomous agility tends to struggle to scale product innovation because it gets bogged down by organizational and technical debt. I think especially when we talk about kind of the scale up space and this first company I worked with, we kind of see that's where some of these agile principles start to fail. So I'll speak specifically about my experience here with Airbnb. So in 2022, I was brought into Airbnb, and at the time, there was a couple things, 2021 and 2022, excuse me. There was a couple things floating in the air. So one, Airbnb had kind of previously been what I would call a fiefdom of autonomous mini CEOs, product managers. They were very well known at the time for their experimentation platform they had built internally. And each of those teams were vying for their kind of experiments and A/B tests to be launched, which caused a lot of internal dependencies and a lot of internal conflict space for getting kind of users to create and launch those experiments. And so, kind of simultaneously, what you saw is a slowdown, frankly, of large-scale product innovation across the company. So they had launched experiences in 2019, and they had launched Lux in kind of late 2019, early 2020. But we were seeing kind of a slowdown of kind of those larger scale product innovations. One other thing happened around that same time, which was COVID. And during COVID, Airbnb, if you may remember, issued a refund for all of their kind of guests who had booked experiences that would have happened concurrent to the COVID time. That policy was quite controversial, and a lot of hosts at the time then kind of left the platform and stopped using Airbnb, and in fact switched over to other platforms and competitors. So what did Airbnb do at that time? So they responded by bringing in Hiroki, who is one of the former CMOs of Apple, and he brought what was called kind of these biannual large Apple type big conference product launch events into the company. And what that did is that consolidated a lot of the product strategy and product innovation and decision making up to the leadership level. At the same time, you can imagine that the aligned autonomy that had previously been kind of practiced across the company, a lot of that decision making moved it into the leadership level, which had a lot of kind of internal and external kind of negative feedback from these product managers who were used to kind of this autonomous decision making at scale. What they also did is they used the principles of Agile at the more strategic level and engaged directly with and created what were called the Airbnb guest and Airbnb host super user councils. Those councils were then the super users of that product, and they helped prioritize the kind of product strategies with the company for the next 6 to 12 months, 6 to 12 to 18 months. In these biannual big product innovation launch events, this is where Airbnb's product strategy would be the press releases out to these users every 6 months. And then the product teams and design teams worked backwards from these press releases to then build and orchestrate both the product strategy and the new product experiences, but also the internal ways of working and operationalization of those new experiences. So as a result, you can imagine there was much more big bang product innovation. So since the advent of this kind of new way of working, we've seen Airbnb launch kind of the Pixar themed experience stays. And you've seen them launch kind of more large scale policy changes, which is one of the programs I was a part of, where there was an integration of policy into the product experience and in the revamp of the help center and how they operationalized internal products internally to help with trust and safety and improve safety on the platform. So it's been a very interesting result for Airbnb. I'm happy to talk more about it in the Q&A section. You can imagine that on the whole, there's much more product innovation and some clear alignment to Agile strategy at the leadership level. However, there's much less autonomy and organization at the kind of lower echelons of the organization. And one other trade-off I would say with this experience is that it's become quite hard to prioritize any of these kind of organizational or technical debt initiatives across the organization, as those aren't kind of big, sexy announcements you can make to users. So that's our first takeaway. The second takeaway is high upfront costs to agile transformations and delayed benefits lead to a lot of skeptics quickly losing faith in agile transformations. So this comes from my experience working with Twitter in 2020. And I have a graph to kind of illustrate the journey that we went on and kind of where we might have gone wrong and some lessons learned, hopefully, for this audience. So in 2020, Twitter was, again, facing the global pandemic and needed to pivot about 50% of the product strategy that they had created, including their OKRs and initiatives, in response to the pandemic. And what they realized is while they had completed this really beautiful kind of 4 to 6 month planning process about what their goals would be for the year, they needed to all of a sudden rapidly respond to the changes in the market. And they weren't able to do so. They were able to recreate the strategy at the leadership level, but really struggled with permeating that strategy back down into their matrixed organization. So we were brought in to help them think through how they might use internal products, tools, and supported agile ways of working to quickly cascade this new strategy and get up and running. So what we did is we piloted a internal work management system, which I'll also talk about later with Spotify, in their consumer organization, which was about 1,500 people, for one product initiative. So what we were able to do is kind of take users from this gray box here, which is where you have kind of the gray and the yellow box show that you have some harmonized practices, some harmonized mindset, some maybe you're on the same internal work management platform, but you might experience a dip in productivity, which is also what we experienced a bit because people are learning new ways of working. And it was quite uncomfortable for them because they were used to having their own way of working for each of the kind of matrixed teams. And they weren't used to having to kind of coordinate or kind of potentially duplicate for a period of time some of the tools or efforts that they had across their matrix organization. So this is kind of where we started to hit some change resistance, in particular in what we call the middle layer of the organization. So my recommendation and lesson learned to you all here would be to deploy pilot programs to show the ability of one initiative moving much more efficiently than the previous kind of more aligned autonomy way of working, and show that you're able to deliver that initiative more efficiently. We did not do this in terms of we moved the initiative into the work management platform, but we didn't have the metrics nor the kind of organizational middle management layer buy-in to really show this moving more efficiently over time. Instead, the mistake is that we focus much more on the leadership level and showing the leadership that we had a proof of concept of how they could scale this across the organization, which made leadership very bought in. However, because the middle management layer didn't see themselves in this vision and didn't see the benefits to their organization, they kind of lost faith in the program and scaling the program, and therefore it stayed at just kind of within this one organization and within this one initiative. However, once you kind of get through this yellow box here of harmonized tools and practices, you can really start to achieve that kind of scaled product autonomy and a scaled alignment that is the benefit of both kind of marrying strategy at the leadership level and company-wide level strategies with the kind of aligned autonomy of kind of on the ground, more agile ways of working. Awesome. So that leads me to my last takeaway, which is user processes and tools to systematize and prioritize the right individuals and interactions. So bringing us back to the original kind of Agile manifesto, the original principles were people and interactions over process and tools. However, I think in my experience, when we get, especially when you're trying to scale up your organization and when you're in an organization post IPO and you have to have a certain level of forecasting and predictability as an organization, that agile principle starts to break down. Not only because it creates the technical kind of debt and from lack of documentation, and the organizational debt from everyone working in their own kind of flavors of working, but also because you create so many different systems and process and tools that just aren't aligned. So I'll speak more tactically about my experience most recently at Spotify, where we can see this play out. So at Spotify in late 2022, the organization set out with kind of three new strategic goals that were quite different from how Spotify had been operating up until that point. So at this point, Spotify is a company of around 8,000 people that scaled to 10,000 during right after the pandemic. They were an organization that was a few years post IPO, but still not profitable. And they were predominantly known as a music streaming app that had just started breaking into the podcast space, but was not the market leader at that point. So Spotify set out three strategic goals. So one, become a super app. Again, previously, Spotify had multiple disparate app and desktop experiences. For example, I think if any of you are Spotify users, you might remember that like there was a heart button for liking songs on some views and a plus button in other views for listening and liking music. And the experience was very disparate and inconsistent across the apps and across the platform. Number two is they wanted to expand content types. So meaning beyond podcast and music, they wanted to move into the audiobook space, video podcasts, there's even courses now, and many more. And three, the last thing is that Spotify wanted to become profitable for the first time in company history, consistently, I should say. So those are all three great ambitious goals. However, there were several obstacles for Spotify to achieve that kind of end goal. So one, Spotify's product line, so music podcasts and the subscription business, etc., all operated independently in siloed teams. You might remember this as being called the Spotify model, and we can talk a little bit about that more in the Q&A section. But this is where kind of there was the concept initially of the Spotify model was these kind of highly autonomous two pizza teams where they can kind of work and make their own kind of product decisions to move as quickly as possible. So there was some legacy of that system still in play. So secondly, the other issue was that there was, because that model didn't quite scale at the 10,000 person headcount, and also in a globally distributed company, there were quite a few interdependencies. So that created a lot of human toil, a lot more headcount dedicated to solve that issue, and a lot of kind of coordination rituals and meetings. At one point, the average program manager at Spotify spent about 9 hours a day in meetings just coordinating dependencies across teams. And so lastly, the other issue I mentioned was the inconsistent user experience. So different like buttons, and also in 2022, the home feed, it was kind of impossible to have shared experiences of different content types on the home feed. So there was one feed for music, one feed for podcasts. You couldn't dynamically kind of interchange between the content types. So there were quite a few obstacles in Spotify's way to kind of achieving this overall vision. And from an internal kind of agile and product strategy perspective, there wasn't that leadership alignment on strategy. There was, frankly, just not internal tools or systems set up to kind of allow for leadership to facilitate these conversations. And it was quite costly to continue to operate in that manner. So what was our solution? So our solution was to take this time a work management platform similar to what I did at Twitter, but also augment with a visualization platform. And I'll speak more about that in a second. So the work management platform is a tool that Spotify now uses to coordinate plans and projects and processes across the entire organization in one shared platform. It also, with the visualization system, collects data and insights on how effectively Spotify builds products at scale. So with this work management and visualization platform, we created an entire product ecosystem supported by new processes and ways of working to efficiently deliver a single Spotify super app experience across multiple content offerings. This allowed teams to coordinate their product strategy on one single space, creating shared roadmaps and creating delivery management products and features, and deliver the Spotify super app. Secondly, it created a central hub for all work to reduce silos across products and organizations and help teams work together to track progress towards goals. And what I would say is enable the right conversations with individuals. And then lastly, we delivered the visualization platform, which collects data on how Spotify works and allows both leadership and insights and data scientists to look at how we do work and optimize our teams to become more efficient. So because of this work management platform, we've really hit this sweet spot of both strategy and agile working at scale and using shared processes and tools to enable the right conversations across organizations and across different functions. So those are my three takeaways from my experience working in industry. I know there might be some provocative takeaways and thoughts there, so I'm curious to hear people's questions and hear from the audience. Awesome.
Thank you, Hosanna. It's an amazing background and set of experiences you have to share. I wanted to start with one question, going a bit back to the giveaway and the invitation. But I think there's a lot of people out there who wonder what really happened in Spotify after Henrik left. Uh, and so maybe you could just share a few words about how things are going today and how that whole set of ideas that the world has come to know and some people love about the Spotify model. Where is the company Spotify today?
Yeah,
That
absolutely. So I mentioned it a little bit in the talk, but yeah, I think um, Henrik even mentions it himself in his post, although I never have met him, just full disclaimer, um, that, this was a framework really meant to trigger conversation, and it wasn't meant to be some blueprint that people kind of roll out, in their organizations and take as gospel per se. Um, so, However, with that, I think there's still a lot of principles that remain true from the Spotify model in terms of kind of having that balance between alignment and autonomy. I think what you heard me speak about is that as Spotify has kind of, especially post IPO, wanting to be a single super app experience, the cost of that is organizational synchronization.
Mhm. Yeah.
So, in the past, where leaders could kind of fully make their own product decisions and product launch experiences, kind of in a silo, now they're having to coordinate very frequently, and there is a cost associated to that. But as a team, as an organization, Spotify has kind of shown that they're okay with those trade-offs. So what I would say is now there's weekly e-team alignment meetings. So everyone who reports to the two co-presidents, both on the business and product teams, need to have these weekly alignment meetings where they go through and use our processes and use
Yeah.
our
Mhm.
tools
Mhm.
to create that alignment. So I think that's probably one of the biggest pivots you'll see away from the system, from the Spotify model and kind of the next iteration of it, if you will.
Thank you. Well, let's open it up for questions if anyone wants to chip in. I'm sure there must be one.
Looks like we also have one question on the Menti I can ask here or answer here while we're waiting. So one, would you mind unpacking a bit more the actual work management platform used and developed? A demo in some form would be amazing. Um, no demo for right now, although like would love to work on that. But I can explain a bit more in detail how it works. So essentially a work management platform, people often think of tools like Jira or Asana, and that is part of the kind of work management platform. However, the key difference is you take it a step further and connect it to your goals and strategy. So instead of just tracking at the developer level, kind of what people are working on, um, you connect that to the goals and strategy of the organization, not necessarily to micromanage people. People think the benefit, you know, that's the point of it would be Big Brother. It's actually not at all. Like you kind of abstract away the actual work items at the developer level. What you use it for is to then show how much investment you're kind of making in each of these product strategies and use it to track kind of the product roadmap and the product kind of delivery timelines automatically. So instead of having developers write all their work for their teams and their backlogs and then have to manually kind of voice that over in a meeting for their higher ups every kind of week or so, you just rely on the data and reports that talk about, okay, this team has roughly this number of tasks left. Here's their velocity. We project that this team with the other teams that are working on this project will probably finish in the next 3 to 6 months. And then again, the point is these tools enable conversations and kind of raise flags to that management and leadership level instead of trying to replace conversation. Hopefully I answered that question. Feel free to jump in live if you would like more clarification.
Yeah, so we
Great.
can't see from Menti who's asking the question. Tom had a question, but it sounds like Tom, you already got part answer. But what Tom asked, that's in the Zoom chat. So I would like to hear more detail about what is synchronized and how. But I think you somehow spoke to this. But anything else to add?
Yeah, I'd like to hear more detail about what synchronize and how help me understand that better. Yeah, so synchronization, essentially what we mean is uh, creating alignment where it's necessary in the product strategy. So let me give a tactical example of that. Um, in the example of the like buttons and the kind of shared canvases of the home page and the user experience, there's very specific user touch points like the homepage canvases, which is where you're displaying kind of content suggestions for the user in the app, or in the like experience when you're on the what we call the now playing view, which is the view you see when you're either your podcast or your audiobook or your um, kind of music is playing. Those are kind of shared user experiences that need to be consistent, right? And so that's where we really, at the leadership level and then at the middle management level, really create that alignment and synchronization. So, what that looks like from the work management platform side is there's a shared ticket with all the dependent teams with very clear kind of product definitions of done that those teams then work towards in a one single shared view, as opposed to previously where you might have a product spec with some of this worked out, but those dependent teams would then have their own backlogs and not necessarily have time to talk to each other or synchronize. And then as a result, launch kind of different experiences across music versus podcast experiences. So that's how the work management platform, in conjunction with product strategy, work together to deliver this synchronized experience for users. Does that make sense, Tom? Great.
Let's take a real live question because they are really appreciated. Silvio,
Yeah, it's
go
actually
ahead.
the continuation question of the first one. That was mine.
Okay.
So my question, well, it's actually two questions. So one is about the cadence of reacting to changes. So maybe you can speak a bit about that. You talked about the example of the pandemic situation that I think challenged a lot of organizations. So maybe a little bit on the learnings from that, because like we all know the usual cadence of OKRs, for example, on a quarterly base. So maybe you can talk about this. And the second question would be specifically for like the continuation at Spotify or any other example you can think of, your experience around scaling frameworks for that help really with the product management approach. So less Nexus, Scrum at scale, safe. It's on purpose to put it on the last place, but so maybe you can go into both of those directions a bit. That would be interesting.
Yeah, awesome. So also keep me honest to make sure I answer both of your questions. So one was examples of pivoting product strategy at scale, kind of using the pandemic as an example, right?
Yes, and what you learned from that in terms of what's a good cadence to be to think ahead enough, but also
Mm.
be able to react quick enough if necessary.
Um, Yeah, absolutely. So for the first one, I think I'm just going to obviously caveat what I say with that it really depends on the scale of your organization. What I don't want people to get is like the Spotify model actually in Agile works really well and did work really well for each of the companies I worked at under around that like 2 to 5,000 employee headcount number. It's just when, they were getting to the 10, 5 to 10,000 range when they were post IPO, when they had to have kind of, frankly, the macroeconomics kind of environment where you could borrow capital basically for free went away, right? Like all these things changed. So I, there's times and places for each of these frameworks. Um, one isn't perfect and one they're better situated for different topics. That being said, what I would say for those companies I worked with in particular, I think we've maybe I might be speaking too broadly, but I think we've all been part of these like annual planning kind of rituals that, are meant to last for a few months and then end up taking 6 months to like actually go through the entire process. And then by the time you get to the end of the process, you're planning for the next year already. And so it feels like you're either planning or planning. So, what I would say is Spotify and specifically Gustav, our CPO, has a pretty clear perspective where he wants us to be spending less than 20% of our time planning. And he has very strict, we also now follow the Airbnb model of the kind of 6 months product cadence. Um, we've tried 3 month, we tried this like semesterly, so for every doing 3 launches a year, so every 4 months. We tried annual launches, we've tried quarterly launches. Um, and I think what works really nicely about this, 20% time planning, 6 month kind of product launch cadence is that it does allow you to start to prove out concepts. Oftentimes, not all of the product features that we plan for that 6 month time end up launching in their entirety, but it does allow us to kind of do early MVPs of certain product ideas or innovations or experiences and like kind of cut some of those products that aren't working out so well or double down our investment on the products that we are seeing work well. So I think there's no perfect answer, but that's a balance I've seen kind of work well within our organization. And then I think, sorry, remind me of your second question.
The second question was about scaling frameworks that you saw working very
Yeah.
well, especially from a product perspective.
Yeah. To be honest, I think there's pros and cons to all of them. We did look at Safe briefly for Airbnb when I was working there in 2019. I think what we found was that to my second takeaway about there being too much of a high cost and then people getting skeptical and abandoning the kind of agile transformation in general. I think there was a lot of kind of agile purist thinking that was happening or safe purist thinking that was happening. And so kind of people checked out of the transformation. So what I would say is rather than focus on a specific framework, understand what the goals are for your transformation that you're trying to achieve. Every organization has a different, like for again, for Spotify, it used to be speed. That's why they did the Spotify model. You get really fast at deploying things, but you have a really disunified experience and siloed decision making, right? Then the most important thing for Spotify was throughput of company-wide initiatives, shared product experiences. That's a whole different metric you're optimizing for. And so you kind of find the framework that helps you kind of optimize for what your specific goals are for that next phase of growth. That's what I would say.
Yeah.
Any more questions, comments? We had a few in Menti as well.
Yeah, I can go back to Mentee. I've got one. How do you get teams to adapt quickly to new tools and ways of working, especially when there's resistance to change and that they are focusing more on delivering under tight deadlines? Yeah, that's a phenomenal question. What I would say is we really had this one was really important for us as specifically at Spotify, um, for the work management platform. We were really focused on meeting users where they were at, especially at the developer level, because people were so flat out with building towards this new unified super app experience. So we knew the program would fall flat on its face in adoption if we didn't make it as easy as possible for people to adopt this new platform. Um, and so what we did is, to be honest, we made progress be the not be the enemy of good. And we allowed a lot of users to stay on the tools and the platforms that they were familiar with if they could give a good business rationale for why they were on that specific platform and what that platform and tool did for them that our tool didn't couldn't do for them. So one was giving people the ability to kind of argue for why their ways of working were actually better or leading to the shared outcomes that they needed to lead to. And then the second thing is we tried to take advantage of APIs and data collection as much as we could. So a lot of teams had tools that we could just collect the data from and frankly kind of leave them on the tools that they were already using, but we could still get the benefits we needed to create that leadership alignment and management layer by just kind of sucking the data through the APIs of those tools. So that also allowed us to like phase out the rollout of the whole platform by just kind of onboarding the folks who absolutely needed to be onboarded first, then catching data that we needed to catch to make this management layer work, then eventually kind of onboarding the rest of the organization as we grew a more rich product environment for the work management platform. So that's kind of how we did it, is kind of taking the tool, phasing out the tool transformation from the kind of process and ways of working. So hopefully it wasn't all too much at once, and then giving people the ability to opt in when they were ready.
Very well. Maybe we could keep the last question for the wrap up about the crystal ball and stuff. So I have one for you,
Yeah.
and of course others are willing to or welcome to chip in. I was wondering on the topic of product management and product innovation. How is a company like Spotify working with that? Where do they get their great ideas from? How do they do market validation, all of that? So not like the product management ABC, but more any special insights or takeaways to how that's playing out for the product strategy.
Yeah, I think something I would say I would credit to Spotify being uniquely good at um, is Spotify being a Swedish organization. At least as an American outside-in perspective, I would say it's quite consensus driven and much less hierarchical than some cultures can be and some company cultures can be. And how that kind of permeates within the organization is some of our best features have come from kind of either hackathons or developers or kind of entry level product managers, and there's not the leadership doesn't necessarily have as much ego to say like, hey, this idea needs to come from us. They will interrogate the ideas and challenge the ideas and make sure there's product market fit, etc. But just as an example, like Daylist, if some of you have used that product, it's a uh, AI kind of generated playlisting feature where people can kind of get their playlist for the day And it went viral on social media because these playlist titles had these really kind of fun, quirky playlist titles that people
Mhm.
then posted on social media. And that idea came from a software engineer in our personalization, which is our machine learning organization.
Yeah.
So I think it's one of those things where Spotify is very good at kind of incubating innovation from all levels, especially with this work management platform, being able to have visibility and clarity into those initiatives, and then
Mhm.
getting the leadership buy-in to scale and interrogate and fund those kind of product
Yeah.
features and
Yeah.
ideas.
So ideas like that, how are they sourced? How do they travel in the organization?
Yeah,
What is
so
the
um,
process around it?
so with the work management platform, it would get I mean, previously something like that would have maybe been funded partially as kind of a pet project. Maybe if there's bandwidth within a certain team to do an A/B test on it, it might have gotten funded,
Yeah.
it might not have. Now with the work management platform, there's company-wide visibility on all initiatives.
Mhm.
So that initiative, which wasn't even ranked as a company-wide initiative initially when it was created, then got visibility and was able to work its way up through kind of the middle management layer into the leadership visibility layer
Yeah.
because of
Mhm.
the shared visibility of work across teams. And in particular, like showing how that specific product was doing really well in the A/B testing.
Mhm.
Having both those systems
Yeah.
kind of show the same level of
Yeah.
visibility of this project kind of enabled that leadership buy-in.
Yeah. Thank you. So that was almost the answer you were supposed to give. It's traveling in the work management system. Great. We are close to 10 minutes before the full hour, and we'll do a good effort to stop in time. So any final question, comment from everyone? Otherwise, of course, I have a few.
Yeah, there's
Oh,
also
I'll go.
a few
Yeah,
more on the Menti as well. I don't know if we want to,
well, I
I can
think
make some.
on my count there was only one left, which was about this crystal ball thing. So I plan to
Oh, I have
get.
one that says, what's some advice you have on the soft skills, personality
That's
skills
true.
when
Yeah.
entering the space, work optimization at a tech company may benefit from? Um, my advice to anyone who's going into this, uh, type of work, you need, especially internal product management and working on internal products. It, it can be rare being a product manager to sit next to your users. And so if they don't like something, they will come to your desk and they will find you and they will tell you they don't like it, which is, I think, one of the beauties of working on internal products, but also is something that is quite unique to this product management space. Um, so my advice would be have humility and really like take advantage of that proximity to your users. And oftentimes, sometimes they'll come to you with the solution, but be able to read the problem that they're speaking to out of the solution that they're offering. So that would be my advice is be humble, take advantage of being able to listen to your users and have good listening and engagement skills to where you can kind of pick through what they're offering. Great.
Mado, go ahead.
Oh, thanks for spotting me, Martin. I have one general question for Hosanna, not related to what she was talking about strategy in our slides. What were the best sources for education or learning for you related to problem solving and critical thinking? It could be
Mm,
books, could be courses, could be certifications, could be projects, anything. Could you share that with us?
yeah. Maybe I'll say a general point and then I can talk through some specifics. I think the best way to kind of be a strategic problem solver is to expose yourself to as many diverse kind of streams of thinking and kind of functions as possible. So what do I mean by that? I think because I did come from a software engineering background, but then also worked in the consulting world, but got to work with so many different companies. And then now I'm kind of back in tech, but in the media tech space. I think having such diverse experiences has allowed me to see patterns at a macro level that I would imagine would be hard to get exposure to if you don't have that diversity of experience. So that's a point I would just make generally. And then for the specific places I find inspiration, I really like subscribing to different newsletters. So like Lenny's podcast is a great one. There's a lot of very interesting thinkers who go on to that and offer kind of their thought leadership. Even if you don't believe every word people say, like it's very interesting to see how people talk about the problems that they face on that podcast, and then also the diversity of the functions that they get to come on that podcast, I find very interesting. Um, and then I think the other place I like to go is I also like looking from outside the tech industry. So there's the Knowledge Project is a podcast I listen to, and it's all about mental models and how people use different mental models in the research space and in manufacturing. And so having kind of diverse thought and mental models from other industries kind of helps me keep a fresh perspective on tech and not just regurgitate kind of whatever the ethos of the day is. Yeah, the Knowledge Project. I can send the link through here.
I gotta say, Lenny's newsletter has been my favorite place for the past 4 or 5 years, and
Nice.
I've been a nerd of mental models and frameworks, problem solving since my first preparation for joining strategy consulting companies 15 years ago. Since
Oh,
then, I've
great.
looked. So it's really nice confirmation bias to hear you speak about this.
Good. Sometimes we need that too. Sometimes you need to know you're on the right track.
But
Thanks
you,
for
you know
asking me
what?
that question, Madam.
Oh, you're welcome. Oh, is it over? Okay, I know. I thought we were already past the hour. I just wanted to make one more comment to what Hosanna was saying. Building on that, if you look at the most famous books in product management, you will see that they all have at least 1/3 of the book dedicated to organizing frameworks and explaining when they should be used. That's called pragmatics of using a framework, and where they stem from, so that people know where they could be useful and why not. Why not. What I think is missing in a lot of those books, so some of them, like the SVPM, so Marty Kagan's product management world, are very much focused on stories and cases and real life stuff. But there is a missing link between the world of frameworks and problem solving, the intellectual part, the cognitive part, and the real life part. It's the world of experimentation and cases. And I found a huge gold mine of valuable frameworks and tools in the past 5 years in the world of UX and design, and people who come from testing, people who do product marketing, for example, people who do UX testing. There's books, communities, podcasts. I found them very interesting. For me, this is the triad. You have the frameworks. That's what I learned in consulting. You have the real life. That's the guys really doing products and making money. The money guys, the strategy guys, the pragmatic guys, and then you have the guys with the design and UX and experimentation and statistics. So just wanted to share that. I don't know if that makes sense for you, Hosanna.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I put a couple more thinkers in there who, again, I'm not aligning myself to their like ethos or ideas, but I think it kind of, to your point about the difference between mental models and then kind of learning through reality versus also then looking at kind of, research statistical applications. I think those folks are very interesting in the sense that like they're trying to coordinate between those three. And I think, to be honest, there's a lot more we can do. And we definitely, with the visualization platform, have started on our own journey around kind of productivity metrics, not just developer productivity metrics, but like just overall initiative productivity metrics. So throughput, time to market, how do you measure that effectively? What are the right units? How do you like avoid gamification? So there's a lot more to think about there, and I think it's super interesting space.
We experience a bit of a catch-up effect here, which is approaching the full hour. So there were two questions from Tom in the chat that I didn't see at first. So the first one, they're quite short. but they might require longer answers. Can you comment on the development models and profitability? The one, and then the second one, is there a written source of your experiences?
So far right now, I've just done some YouTube, some webinars and this. So I do have some publication coming out in the next month or so, in addition to some other thinkers, but that's a good prompt for me to write this down. So thank you for that. On the, let me see. So it's
Profitability, I think is the question.
the dev models and profitability. Yeah. So
Exactly.
yeah, exactly. So on the profitability side, I think specifically there, what we did with the work management platform, um, was that I think these again, because of the kind of, if we think back to the agile principles around kind of, we have there's a focus on kind of peoples and interaction, which I think again is fantastic. However, that really struggles at scale. There was a lot of human toil involved around coordinating, like I mentioned, coordinating dependencies, meetings about status, right? And so what the work management platform and visualization platform allowed us to do is say, hey, we still want to enable these conversations. We still want to have these interactions, but can we have tools that enable these conversations and alert and prioritize the conversations instead of having humans run around and to Mara's point about kind of statistics and organizational complexity, like we don't need to have humans doing geometric, like discrete math, node connections. We can have machines and tools do that for us and then alert the humans to do what they do best, which is have these interactions and conversations. Um, so what Spotify was able to do is, again, because in part of the work management platform, they were able to kind of right size and scale their organizations more efficiently so that there was fewer people doing that coordination effort and more of that on the tool side. And then refocus those kind of people towards building products and the engineers building the tools, building the products and features for the organization while
Two
not
minutes,
sacrificing growth. Yeah.
2 minutes to go. There was one question. I think you almost came to that, which is about looking in the crystal ball. What do you think is coming next in this space? AI, more specialization, workers less, etc. So
Yeah.
maybe
So
just a short comment. Where do you
yeah,
see things
I'll be
going?
very quick. So, to the visualization platform, I think that's where the thing I'm most proud of is we have created the data to be structured enough and quality enough such that we could train internal models on how Spotify, like to tell us how Spotify could organize it the most efficiently. I'm not saying that AI is going to tell us that answer off the bat. Like, I think that's going to take a lot of editing and honing. But I think that's the future is AI workflows, AI process optimization, given certain outcomes that we can optimize for because of the amount of data AI can process. And then, of course, humans will need to strategize and understand if those are the right things to optimize for. But at least using AI to do the kind of traveling salesman problem would be great.
Hosanna, thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us. Any
Awesome.
final thing we can do for you before we hang up?
Uh, no, thank you so much for your time. Please reach out with any questions or thoughts or comments. Would love to stay connected to this audience and thank you for your time.
Well, thank you for being here and thank you for your presentation.
Awesome.
Thanks,
Talk
Anna.
soon.
Okay. Bye
Cheers.
bye.
Bye, everybody. Thanks, Martin.